has been involved for 25 years in issues connected with the growing, spinning, and weaving of cotton, advocating small-scale and dispersed diverse production chains that could be owned and managed by producers themselves. She is part of an informal research group that researches the history of Indian cotton textile production in pre-colonial and colonial times. As an outcome of this research, in 2005, Usrama founded the Decentralized Cotton Yarn Trust, which sets up small-scale units to process raw cotton to yarn at field locations, using small-scale spinning machinery, which enable the entire farm-to-fabric cotton processing at village level. The product is cotton fabric and sold under the brand name Malka, which is also available in natural dyes. Thank you so much for agreeing to be with us this evening, and I welcome you to take the mic.
Right, can everybody hear me? Divya, you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Well, hello all the faculty, staff and students of NIFT Chennai. I had actually prepared this lecture for the students. And so it's kind of basic kindergarten stuff, and I'm sure the faculty knows it better than me. The title I've been given for my talk is Evolution of Indian Handloom Post-Independence. So what I propose to do with this lecture is to look at each word of that title in detail. The first word is evolution. And it's very appropriate, as like any living entity, the handloom is in a constant state of evolution, changing what it produces, what raw materials it uses, and who is doing the weaving. The second word is Indian. Indian is actually very significant because the handloom, connected with the word handloom, because the handloom is India's gift to the world. As one of you said in response to my question, 95% of the world's handloom fabrics come from India. This is what the response I got from one of the students. In every other country except India and our neighbors, Pakistan and Bangladesh, handloom weaving is just a hobby for a few. But here it is an activity providing livelihood to millions. The third word is handloom. The handloom itself is a versatile, flexible weaving tool run by kinetic renewable energy, which does not need to use fossil fuels. Post-independence. Sadly, the brown sahibs who took over from the white ones at independence thought mechanization was the way to go and favored the production methods of the Industrial Revolution over hand production. This choice has left handloom weaving out in the cold in matters of policy. The rulers of modern India have not valued and promoted handloom weaving as an industry. They have treated it as a basket case, needing charity, rather than recognizing it as a vibrant rural industry. So after this brief exploration of the title, which we'll take up in more detail later, more about the question which I asked the students and the responses which I got. So the question which I asked is, what do you know about the history of handloom weaving in India? And I got varied responses. 4 out of the 10 replies agreed that it was thousands of years old, while one said that it began during colonial times. One person believes that people living in caves first used leaves before inventing weaving. Another one I didn't understand said traditional revaluation to every finest strands of threads. Maybe some of these can be explained later. One person thinks that if it were not for the British, our handloom industry would be booming. But sadly, as I said earlier, the brown sahibs who took over from the white ones seem to continue the colonial way of thinking. 3 of those students seem to have done some research into the subject in some detail. One correctly said that India makes 95% of the world's handloom fabric, and 2 others spoke about specific weaving castes and communities, the Saurashtras, the Devangars, and the Saligars. I wish we had time to hear more in detail from these last 2. So anyway, hope to come to Chennai and meet the students and hear more from them. Well, we all seem to agree that handloom weaving has a glorious past. But we should not look at the past as just a matter of historical interest, but as a springboard for the future. As the great Chinese sage Confucius advised us, we will study the past to define the future. Let's see where the springboard of history can take handloom weaving in the 21st century. We know that handloom weaving happened in India for thousands of years without environmental damage. Maybe if we look at this long textile history, we'll see a way forward towards sustainability in cloth production today and in the future, particularly in cotton textiles. But first, let's sweep away some cobwebs from our minds. The first cobweb is that handlooms are suited only for old people. A lot of people think that. To see a different point of view, I will ask Divya to show. If we look at this long textile history, we'll see a way forward towards sustainability in cloth production. So can we see the
Next number.
I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe like Eshnakoti, you already tried wearing a handloom sari with sneakers or tying it like a dhoti or with t-shirts instead of blouses, which I still do in cold climates. Handloom saris are very versatile and we should explore all their possibilities. Another wrong idea that needs to be corrected is that there are very few handloom weavers left today. That's not true. The latest All India Handloom Census of 2019 to 20 tells us that there are over 3.5 million of them, even today, after so many weaving families have left their profession. And handloom weaving still employs the largest number of people in rural areas after agriculture. Meanwhile, while it is true that in many traditional weaving areas, weavers are giving up weaving, in other non-traditional weaving areas like Siwan district in Bihar, there are new weavers enthusiastically taking to it. Now about the loom itself. Some designs are so useful that they don't change for thousands of years, like the wheel, which was invented more than 3,000 years ago and is very much in use today. The hand loom too was invented 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, and basically the design remains the same. Why? It's because the hand loom is designed to be flexible. It can weave any and all sorts of different yarns, traditional or modern, and it can produce a variety of different fabrics, something that India was always famous for. In fact, it is when we decide to give up on diversity and move towards uniformity by using a machine for weaving that we lose our greatest advantage. The most important word in our title is Indian, because that is what defines our identity and what makes us different from people of other countries. Indian handloom weaving as a large-scale activity in contemporary times is unique in the world. It happens only in our subcontinent. It is particularly significant in the current Anthropocene era, when the pollution caused by industrial activity which uses fossil fuels is damaging the ecosystems that support life on Earth. This is where India leads the world. The world is today looking for green, viable, sustainable industries, and there is a lot of buzz on the internet about artisanal ways of producing things, like artisanal bread making, for example, as people realize that handmade bread tastes better than its machine-made equivalent. If more people had the chance to use handmade cloth rather than machine-made, they would find that it feels more comfortable on the skin than machine-made cloth. With our large-scale hand weaving capacity, this is where India trumps the world. Again, remembering Confucius's advice to study the past to define the future, we look at the period in history where India was the supplier of cotton cloth to the world, with a share of 50 to 60% of the world's textile trade. Cotton cloth making has been India's biggest industry for thousands of years. India became rich in gold and silver, not because we had gold and silver mines, but through export. And cotton cloth was one of the major items of export to the Western world from India, all during the period, roughly from the 1st century of the Common Era to the 18th. Gold and silver poured into India. So much so that in the 1st century of the Common Era, the Roman historian Pliny complained that India was draining Rome of her gold. And what textiles did we export? Tomé Pires, a Portuguese traveler, in 1515, speaks of a ship arriving in Malacca from India, carrying cloth of 30 different sorts, worth 90,000 cruzados, he says. And we find a list of 100 such fabrics in the Anglo-Indian dictionary Hobson-Jobson. Albeli, Alrux, Kosai, Bafta, Bejuta, Kora, Doria, Dosutis, Cheat, Ginghams, Jamdanis, Moris, malmals, mushrooms, nainsuks, nilai, Palampur, punjams, susis, and the list goes on. But today, our share of world textile trade is only 5%. And what textiles do we export? Forget that long list of 100 textiles. We export only the cheapest gray sheeting made on power looms. This is not where we should be. We should, in the 21st century, in the Anthropocene era, be the biggest sustainable cloth makers in the world, making and exporting a variety of excellent fabrics. It is well within our capabilities to do once we recognize the strengths of our handloom production. So I made a small PowerPoint presentation for you. Thank you, Jairaj. So go on to second and the third. So with the help of the PowerPoint, let us look at the words of the title in a bit more detail. So the first word is evolution. And what are these evolutions? Next. So there was evolution that happened during the historical times, and there is evolution that goes on now. Evolution of the loom in the 20th century, the evolution of product in the 20th century, and the evolution of the weaver, which is going on now. While the basic design of the loom has not changed, because it has shown itself to be flexible and adaptable enough to weave any and every yarn, different materials such as grasses and tree fibers, besides the usual cotton, silk, and wool, rayon, and polyester. But there have been changes too. For example, this throw shuttle, which takes the weft yarn through the warp by hand, has mostly been replaced by the fly shuttle, which does the job mechanically. When the weaver pulls a cord. And in many places, the frame loom has replaced the pith loom for greater productivity. It's not just the technology that has evolved, but also the weaver. More women are taking to the loom, including some who are not from weaving traditions. These two pictures are of the rookie weavers of Siwan. No, go back slightly, Gerard. Back. So these two pictures are the rookie weavers of Siwan that I mentioned. And they've recently been introduced to hand weaving. And because they're not from weaving traditions, where weaving families want to move out of the profession because they feel handloom weaving is outdated, these new weavers see it only as another livelihood option. And they're taking to it with great enthusiasm, so much so that their time at the loom has to be rationed. And this is one of the subjects which I hope we can talk more about in another session. Indian handloom cloth is admired all over the world, not only in India. Though, of course, the biggest customer is still the Indian woman. The handloom cloth is also appreciated by international fashion designers. This is a fashion show on the Eiffel Tower. And it is also a fashion show that happened on the handloom on the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And handloom, and is made into summer wear for children in the Western world. Now, what is it that's so special about the qualities of handloom cloth? Hand weaving is a slow speed process, and people are finally realizing the advantages of slow processes. You hear of slow food as the opposite of fast food, for example. Slow fashion advocates are now buying clothes that can last them for years, rather than buying unneeded new clothes as dictated by fast-changing fashions. Slow speed weaving on the handloom is kind to the materials it uses. It does not damage the yarns, and it retains the original qualities of the material the yarn is made from. Finally, as we all know, all is not hunky-dory in the handloom world. There are steps that need to be taken to strengthen this unique Indian industry and make sure that it thrives in the 21st century. Steps that both the governing class and also people like us need to take. The first thing the state needs to do is to protect the handloom brand. This means that any non-handloom weaver calling their fabric handloom should be punished. Just like if you or I started to make biscuits and call them Parley's Crackjack and package them in the same kind of packets, we would be arrested by the state's police. The whole machinery of the state protects the brand identities of big companies, but the handloom brand is not offered the same kind of protection. The second thing the state needs to do is to show Indian handloom fabrics at international textile fairs. This is a huge gap that needs to be filled. When Indian handloom textiles figure in international shows, they get a huge response. But unfortunately, the state hardly shows handloom fabrics at international textile fairs. Meanwhile, what we need to do is to wear handloom ourselves and tell our family and friends to wear it too. Now I'll end by a brief introduction to the cotton handloom initiative that I'm involved in, called Malkha. Malkha's aim is to replace large spinning mills with small units located close to cotton farmers and cotton weavers, so that the scale of spinning matches the small scales of cotton farming and handloom weaving. Malkha hopes to link farmers, spinners, and weavers together so that they get to know each other. And eventually, also, they get to wear what they grow and they make. A further evolution of handloom weaving in the 21st century. You can get news of how it's going on Instagram page and malkha.in. Thank you, and I hope the next meeting will be in person. And now we'll see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a lively and a brief presentation. I request everyone to send me questions that I can ask our esteemed speaker. Thank you, Jairaj, for sharing the screen. The screen sharing can now be closed. Jairaj, I request you to please close the screen share. Okay. I'll start with the questions one by one, probably because I have the privilege of being the host for this evening. I'll start with a question of my own, which students have asked me for several years. I love cotton and I wear cotton most of the time, apart from a very rare silk cotton or a silk. But whenever I talk about cotton as being the most wonderful of fibers, students ask me this question, which I'm not able to answer in detail, so I thought I'll ask you today. Given the amount of water that it takes to cultivate and process cotton, how sustainable is cotton fabric?
Well, first of all, you need to grow it in a way that doesn't need so much water. So there are all kinds of ways. You can have different ways of irrigation. You can have the pipe irrigation, and you can have the pot irrigation. I don't know if you know about those. I'm sure you'll find it on the internet. You don't have to water everything as much as they're doing today. You have to be up to all the latest ways of doing things, and also irrigation.
So we have the next question from Professor Dr. Divya Satyan. She is requesting you to clarify the difference between the khadi cloth, which was produced in India at the time of the Swadeshi movement, and that which is being sold as khadi today.
Well, of course, there are a lot of fake khadi shops. So we won't talk about that because obviously you have to avoid the fake khadi shops. But today, they're using the amba charkha, and they consider that to be hand spinning. But in the old days, there was no amba charkha. They used only what today we call the kisan charkha, which is actually run by hand. And it works in a slightly, on the same principle, but it doesn't have so many spindles as the amba charkha does.
So specifically, what about the khadi that is sold by KVIC?
Yeah, they use the amba charkha for spinning. They've also gone into polyester, which was such a flop that they had to stop. I don't see how polyester can be khadi, but anyway.
Okay, so there is a question from Ms. Geeta Ranjani asking about your experience with cotton growers and weavers in Tamil Nadu. Have you had experience with any particular handloom or cluster?
Not really, no. We work with the handloom weavers and the growers and the spinners who are near us. So not too far from Hyderabad. There's some in Jangaon that we're working with now because it's just convenient for us to visit them regularly. I'll be visiting them next week, for example. And so we're trying to get the growers to meet the spinners and the weavers so that the growers also know what happens to the cotton after it leaves their hands. Otherwise, what happens is once they sell their cotton, they don't know what happens to it. So we are making this sort of chain, and we're going to have a big meeting with all these weavers and spinners and cotton farmers so that they meet each other. And eventually we will get them to buy our cotton fabric at a cheaper price, of course. And so that they also wear what starts with what they grow, the cotton that they grow.
That sounds as a wonderful initiative. Knowing what you have developed, how and where it reaches, that's something very important.
So we can do the next talk, which I hope, as I said, I hope it will be in person. And we can tell you how it's going. But in any case, if you look up the Malka Instagram page, you will get some information on how that initiative is going.
I have questions which I'm going to combine because they are similar. I hope the audience does not take offense. So there's one question because you're talking about Malka. So I have a question from Professor Russell asking if you use only natural dyes.
Yeah, only natural dyes, except what we use for red is something called alizarin, which is not really made from plants. It's the first synthetic dye in India.
Okay. So there's one question from VR Karthikara answer, followed by a question from a student, which are very similar. So I'm going to combine. What is the reason for educational institutions in India not getting interested in handlooms at an elementary level? And so follow-up question is that, can handloom fabrics be used as uniforms or as everyday wear in schools?
Well, in the first part of the question, I really can't answer. Why the educational systems don't pay attention to handlooms, I would like to know the answer to that myself. And the second question is, yes, the handloom pictures, I showed you those two pictures of the new weavers in Siwan district. So all there, the cloth which they weave is made into uniforms for the local Delhi, what is the school? Delhi Public School, the local branch of the Delhi Public School. And the students of that school use these handloom tailored uniforms as their school uniform.
Okay, as a continuation to this, I'll ask a connected question. This is from Professor Dr. Basanta. We have perceived that handlooms are more comfortable when they are worn, but are there any scientific studies undertaken to prove this?
No, that's another question which I've been actually trying to pursue research initiatives. There are many research. One of them is to show why handlooms are more comfortable, because the cotton as a fiber is hollow, and you should keep that hollowness, and the less you process it, in handloom it's very, very gentle processing, then it keeps, when it's hollow, then of course it's more absorbent, it takes color better and so on, but there are no scientific studies. So I would also like to know that, or to have it happen. Yeah.
The next question is from Mr. Sridhar. Are there any laws in India to protect the handloom weavers from the knockoffs that are being claimed as handloom?
You see, there's a Handloom Reservation Act, in which some 11 varieties, bordered fabrics, saris, dhotis, towels, are reserved for handloom. But sad to say that it's not observed, and people know very well, the government knows very well that it's not observed. But as I said in my talk, the government doesn't actually crack down on those people who are using the word handloom when it is not actually handloom.
I have two, again, very related questions from two students that I'm going to combine together. What are the challenges in the marketing of handloom products? And what can we do to make it less expensive?
See, handmade bread is always going to be more expensive than machine-made bread. And handmade cloth is always going to be more expensive to buy. But you'll be so much happier wearing it. So it's actually you're paying for happiness.
That's a wonderful way of putting it, ma'am, that you're paying for happiness. Okay, so there is another question from a student. Her name is Soumya. How do we make handloom clothing more appropriate for students in this fast-moving fashion industry?
Well, you have to, I think if you saw that Eshna Kutti video, you'll see that handlooms actually can be worn as any kind of fashion thing. And it's very highly regarded actually as a fashion statement outside India. It's not just in India, but we have, for example, friends in the US who are, doing a whole promotion and exposure of handloom fabrics. And people who don't know much here, it's sort of, we have this saying in Urdu, I don't know if you've heard, ghar ki murgi dal barabar. It's so familiar to us that we don't really pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's very true. And also I feel that there is this very common misconception that handloom means it's a drab, dull fabric.
Exactly. That's why I showed you that Eshna Kutti video.
And I really wanted to wear this sari today when I took this to work. My mom asked, are you sure is this really handloom? I said, yes, it is handloom Chanderi fabric. And because it is handloom, it's so soft and it's so shiny. So I think if we can show that handloom can be party wear, handloom can be worn in a variety of ways, I think that perception will change.
Yes, and the way to do it is to wear it yourself and get all your family and friends to wear it.
Okay, so another question is This is about the threat that is there in the handloom sector, where a lot of families, particularly the younger generations, deserting the loom. So the question is from Manas Trivedi asking, what can we do so that this does not cause the industry to cease to exist?
You see, it doesn't matter if the weavers' children themselves don't want to weave. We can get other non-weavers to do it. As long as there is a market for handloom, and as long as there is prestige attached to handloom weaving and handlooms. If they see, more people like you or Esna Kutti and, people like that wearing handlooms, and it encourages more people to wear it. That prestige is what the children of the handloom weavers feel that they don't have. But it's not necessary for, doctors' children don't necessarily become doctors. So we can get new weavers in. And I think maybe in one whole session, we should talk about what's happening in this Siwan district in Bihar with all these new weavers.
So maybe removing this whole idea that this is a hereditary profession for a caste or a community, will that help?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's another question from Professor Dr. Divya. I can see her typing quickly. Do you think obtaining GI tag on different handlooms of India has helped the weaver and the craft?
Not really, no.
Okay. So,
you see, there's a gap between what we say and it reaching the handloom weaver. There's a big gap there. So you have to talk to the handloom weavers, and you have to fill those missing gaps. The communication, quite often the designer's communication is to fellow designers. And you have to talk to the weavers themselves and see what they feel and how they would like things to happen. And there has to be much more communication.
I have a very a difficult question or a wicked problem asked by, I'm assuming this is a student, Netra Shri. Even when there is so much support for handloom in the country at a policy level, why are the weavers themselves not economically developed? Why are they being considered as a low class in the society?
Well, let me start with the first part of the question. Where is the policy support? I don't see policy support. Where is the policy support? Please look up government policies with regard to handloom, and you will find that the handloom budget has been reduced year to year, even though prices of everything else are going up. But the handloom budget is tiny. And so there's very little policy support. And the second thing is handloom weavers are giving it up, as I said, because they don't feel that it's a prestige occupation. So the minute that, and that's up to us, if we can see that we wear it all the time and on occasions. I'm happy to see Sonia Gandhi always wearing handlooms, but not all the women in politics wear handlooms.
I have a question from one of our faculty, Mr. Abdul. Considering the market challenges to handloom products with wearable dress materials, which is being taken up by power looms and mill-made products, why cannot we use handloom weaving to create special fabrics like medical textiles?
See, those are all for niche markets. Those special textiles are all for niche markets. And yes, we should have them, of course. We should have those wonderful, I think in Bangladesh, they're trying to revive the old, very fine muslins and so on. And of course we should. But the point is, what we need is large scale. We need ordinary fabrics for ordinary people to be made by ordinary weavers, not necessarily caste weavers. What we're looking at scale. Everything in India should happen on a large scale.
The next question, I think Professor Arvindan's question on IPR and GI we have already answered. So I'm moving to the next question. I have two very interesting questions. Assuming we are, okay, one is from Saraswati. When we mix handloom with techniques such as digital printing, is it still handloom?
If the weave is woven on the hand loom, it is still handloom, yes.
Okay. The next question is how, as a buyer, how do we identify handloom cloth versus a mill-made cloth that is made to look as though it has irregularities?
Well, this is one of the problems that the government does not do, is it does not force the power loom to mark their product as power loom. And so they try to pass a lot of the power loom which is being sold as handloom. So we should have a brand and we should see that that brand is protected. And you or I, actually, it's very difficult for us to see the difference between one and the other. That's why all power looms should at least be labeled power loom if they're trying to copy handloom.
Continuing in the vein, I have a question. I was talking to a speaker last year regarding this, and she mentioned that not all hand-spun, hand-woven products get the Khadi mark. So similarly, can something be done for other handloom products as well?
You mean that all handloom products that are woven, all fabrics that are woven on the handloom should have a mark? Absolutely.
We do have a mark. No, I'm talking about, like, for example, if you're currently looking to buy khadi fabrics online or even at the market, they show you two different sets of fabric. One is labeled khadi. The other fabrics are labeled hand spun, hand woven, but the word khadi is not mentioned. So
well,
why
I really don't know what's happening in the khadi world. But the way to be sure that you're buying handloom is to buy it from a reputable handloom seller. Buy it from, if you know cooperatives that are reliable in Tamil Nadu and around Chennai, and they are there, then you should buy it from them or your own handloom apex body, Co-optics. If you know that there are people who are reliable and who reliably sell what they sell can be relied upon to be handloom, then you should buy from them.
So the next question is, what kind of government policies are required at the ground level, at the local level?
Well, I did suggest some in my talk. And one is that you should show it more often, because handloom, you have these big textile shows in India and abroad. And you should, this is not something that individual handloom weavers or even handloom cooperatives can afford to do. It's a very expensive thing. And it is usually done. And we have bodies like HHEC, Handloom and Handicraft Export Corporation, HEPC, Handloom Export Promotion Council. I don't know how many of them are still there. A lot of them have been wound up because, as I said, I don't think the government is really interested in handlooms because they wound up the handloom board. And but we have these government agencies that are supposed to promote handlooms in India and abroad. And I'm afraid they don't do very well. If I was, if they were working for the private sector and they did so badly and they still had their nice air-conditioned offices and cars allotted to them, they wouldn't get very far in the private sector.
Dr. Vasantha has a question. We all understand that handlooms are very versatile. Any suggestions on how we can use its versatility to produce unique fabrics, which will distinguish itself from power loom fabrics?
See, as I said earlier, these unique fabrics will only have a niche market. I'm really interested in the plain, everyday, ordinary handlooms, the handloom cotton, the handloom silk, which are worn, particularly handloom cotton, which are worn by large numbers of people, which can be woven by large numbers of people. So certainly you should have specialized fabrics and you should experiment. Every industry should have some experimental part to it. And, but as I said, I think shouldn't lose sight of the main objective of a handloom policy, which is to make large numbers of handloom weavers able to supply large numbers of handloom wearers.
The next question is again a very interesting question that I myself would like to know the answer to. Certain textiles like the sungri or kalamkari that we get today are done on power loom fabrics.
Yes.
The other processes, the painting and the dyeing are hand done, but the fabric is mill made. So in that case, how would we label them?
That's not my problem, sorry.
Okay.
You should, we do printing on Malka. You will see on the Malka webpage that there are block printed. You see, you can have block printing, you can have screen printing, you can have hand painting, because the kalamkari, which is done in Kalahasti, for example, is all painted by hand. So you can have all those things, but they all use power loom because it's cheaper. But I'm not able to answer that, except that we don't do it. We do all our printing on Malka. And we do block printing, we don't do screen printing.
There is a question from Mr. Praveen Nagarajan. What are the average wages for a handloom weaver in India?
It's difficult to say, but it's low. First of all, the handloom needs a lot of side activities to be done. You need warp winding, you need bobbin winding for the weft as well as for the warp. You need sizing. You need all those things to be factored into the cost. And so the handloom weaver may actually make up to 2,000 or 3,000 rupees a month. But then there are all the other cost factors also. They also have to be paid. By the way, Malka weavers make around 10,000 rupees a month each. And that's what everybody, that should be the minimum wage in rural areas.
The next question is from Mr. Balachandar. Were there any schemes that were done to improve the livelihood of weavers during the pandemic?
I think they gave them free rations. And in some states, you see, it's a state subject, it's not a central subject. In some states, they were given subsidized yarn, but basically they were given free rations as far as I know.
I think with that, we come to the end of the questions. Yeah, one more question I have from Nandakumar sir. What are the different value additions that can be done to handloom textiles to target them for the younger generation?
Well, there's printing, but there's embroidery and all kinds of course, there's printing, there's dyeing, there's you can do embroidery. I think that you can do a lot. But again, I'm not expert on this.
How effective are online sales or social media?
Well, when
it comes to promoting handlooms.
Yeah, actually, I find that the e-commerce site does, our Malka e-commerce site does very well. You know, we restarted the site today, and within an hour we got an order. So I think it's extremely effective and it should be used.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With that, we come to the end of the Q&A session. It's been a pleasure to interact with you on a one-on-one basis and learn so much from you. I now request our Center Director, Professor Dr. Anita Manohar, to give the vote of thanks. Jairaj, if you could unmute, ma'am, please.
No need for vote of thanks. I enjoyed it. Now at my age, I don't do anything I don't enjoy.
Ma'am, there is a
hi, yeah. Hi, ma'am, Ozrama ma'am. It was so lovely having you with us this Saturday evening. And if not such an eminent speaker and a hands-on, person who's in the field of handlooms, I don't think we would have had so many people listening to you and enjoying this lovely evening. And of course, as far as NIFT and NIFT Chennai is concerned, I think in the beginning when I was introducing myself, I told you that we used to do a lot of projects with Dastakar and with Senji. I used to take the students and we converted all the yardage into apparel, and we gave them the patterns and we gave them design ideas. Today we have handloom and handicraft and craft study, which is part of our curriculum. So not only are we encouraging weavers and their children to carry on the legacy of handloom, but we are also encouraging design students. And I think that's a big thrust that NIFT has put on the curriculum. And we also have a textile design department. So we have students who are bringing in new ideas. Every design department and technology department interacts with artisans. So there is design inputs that are going in, and young design students are being, kind of motivated into taking up professions. And I think when there was a period before NIFT took up this huge responsibility, that everybody thought that if you wore handloom, you were growing old. Okay, and only old people wore handloom, because as you also mentioned on its comfort properties, that it's a soft, pliable fabric. So now with NIFT and coming into the picture and being part of our curriculum and it being part of our fashion, making our design collection garments and stuff like that, I think that it's come a long way. As an institution, we played a very vital role in the 7th August 2015 in the launch of the the handloom mark at Madras. I think right from cleaning up the venue to doing up the stage to my faculty being, if you go on to the site, you can see that Divya and a couple of her friends were on the stage assisting the Prime Minister and of course the dignitaries on the stage with awards and stuff. We did the whole place, we did the mementos, we did the exhibition. Of course, we assisted. And NIFT Chennai had a large role to play. So I know how close it is to the heart of every NIFT Chennai faculty, staff, and student, the alumni as well. And I think if handloom has to be popularized, it has to begin with us as parents. I think it's a legacy that we give our children. And if you look at a Malayali or a Bengali or a Maharashtrian, especially Malayalis, they have pride in wearing their handloom even in a wedding. Especially all Christian weddings with the beautiful Balrampuram, kind of styles that have come in from tissue to motifs to whatever. And of course, them taming it and timing it with their jewelry. So I think it's a legacy that every grandmother gives the mother and the child. So how we talk about jewelry and you have those taglines with GRT, which says that 3 generations. So likewise, I think we need to pass this legacy on from generation to generation. If my grandmother was proud to wear it to a party or wear it smartly to church or to a place of worship, then my mother wore it and then I will wear it. And of course, my children and grandchildren will wear it. And with that note, I think I would like to end by saying thank you so much and such a pleasure to see you, to hear your experience. And we wish that one day you'll be in our campus. Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Happy weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. As we wind up, I would like to once again remind everybody at NIFT Chennai to please send your photographs with your name and the details of the weave that you're wearing to the SDAC ID. So it can be shared in our NIFT Instagram page. Let's wear handloom with pride. Let's support the handloom industry. Thank you all for joining. Good evening. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Jairaj, could you please end the meeting?